So next I'm going to show how to make it so that each time you go to a dream you always go to a specific scene, or you reset your dream entirely and things like that. So first let's make a individual scene, and we'll use a controller sensor. Now the basic principle that we're going to use is if we've already been to this scene, we'll kick the player out to the menu or whatever we want, or out of the dream if we want to, based on whether they've been to this scene or not. So first we'll have a variable which remembers if they've been to the scene. So we'll call this scene 1, and we'll make it persistent so that it remembers it, and then we'll use a timeline to set that value if we've been in this scene a certain amount of time. So we'll add a variable modifier that affects that variable name, and we'll set it to 1. Nice and easy. And it will set that once we've played the scene for a certain amount of time over here. So if we play time, then when it gets to that point, then it's set to 1. Now if it was already set to 1, that means we've already played this scene for this amount of time. So we want to check before this point if that variable is already set. The timeline just powers gadgets on and off at the right time. So if we move the playhead while it's over that microchip, it's powering that microchip. When it's not over the microchip, it's not powering the microchip, and that's basically all the timeline does, which is pretty awesome. So in this microchip we want to check that value, so we'll use that modifier that's using the same variable name and use get. So then if we get that value and it's 1, we'll use that value to power a doorway, like that. So if this is sending 0, it won't power this. If it's sending 1, then it will power it. So we'll give this a name so that we remember which kind of doorway it is. This is reset. Cool, so let's go out of here. Save it as a scene. Now let's make a dream and add the scene in here. We'll have an exit over there, like that. Okay, so we have our reset out over there. Now if we play it through the dream, then it will play this scene and it will check for that variable. But because we haven't played this scene before, nothing will happen. But then if we exit, and then we don't reset, so it still has that variable intact, if we play again, it will check and then find that we have that variable ready and kick us out. So now let's do something more feasible. So let's remix this and make it into like a menu page, a menu scene. Okay, and we'll have a normal doorway, and this will just be, it'll just be called next. And when we push the touchpad, we'll just go to the next stream. So if we go out through this doorway, we'll go to the next scene. If we go out through this doorway, it will reset us in some way. So this is the menu, so we don't actually want to check if we've been in the scene or anything. And so we'll just write that it's our menu, put this at a different angle, and cool, so on here we'll tell it to force reset. So instead of using that variable for something, we're just putting the variable in the scene so that it resets itself. So every time we visit the menu, it'll reset whether we've been to that scene or not. So if we go out here, so for this other scene, this will be scene 2. So these modifiers will have to affect scene 2 and scene 2. And I'll rename these scenes so it's a bit clearer. and then our menu will have to reset. Now we have two scenes, we'll have both of those variables, and they will both reset themselves. Okay, and this is the menu, and this could be like an intermediate scene which just resets the variables or does something else that's special. So let's import those scenes. We have the menu first, then we have scene 1, and then scene 2. So now we have a reset and a next on both of these scenes. So the reset will all go back to the menu, like that, and the next will go to the next scene. So this has a next, and it will go to the next scene. That has a next, it will go to the next scene, and this will just go out of the game, or that could go back to the menu. Doesn't matter which you want to do. Cool, so let's see if this works. We go into the menu, then we push the touchpad to go to scene 1, and that's fine. Scene 2, that's fine. Push the touchpad and we go out of the game. But now, normally it would go back to scene 2 because that's the last one we were in. So let's see what happens. It goes back to the menu. Boom. And now if we go to scene 1, and we exit from there, it would normally go back to scene 1. Let's go into here. So it goes to scene 1 for a moment and then kicks us back to the menu again. So that's spot on. Now let's do some little finessing of it. So one thing we can do, instead of using one for each scene, we can use just one variable and do some trickery. We'll call it resuming, because this will mark if we're coming back to a scene and resuming where we left off, in which case we want to kick them out. So this is resuming, and this is just resetting it as normal. Now we'll go into here, and we'll change this to resuming as well. And that. And that. So that will, yeah, so at the start we check this, but then just before we exit, like legitimately through the scene, we want to turn that variable off again. So we'll copy this, or we'll actually copy this whole thing, this timeline, and we don't need that chip. So first we'll set resuming to 0 again, so that we don't reset, we don't get kicked out of the next scene, and then we'll activate that doorway. So yeah, just make sure it's on. Then we'll activate the doorway, which will go out to the next scene, and then instead of powering the doorway directly, we'll just power that timeline. So power the timeline there. I'll just set it to once mode because it's just a test. I'll do the same for the other one. So menu's fine, and then go through to the first scene and second scene, and it never kicks us out because we've reset that perfectly fine. But now if we play, it kicks us back to the menu. If we stop here and go out and then try to play again, that loads that first scene and then kicks us back to the menu. So that's fine, that works. And really, you'd want to do this on like frames, ideally. So you'd use that same trick we talked about earlier. We use L1 and right to stretch it out time-wise, and then we'll just have that last one frame, and that last one frame, like that. And now that checking stuff happens instantly, and we can do the same for this as well. So it changes the value on one frame and then activates the doorway on the next frame. And we can hide this this stuff over here by using a wiper gadget, because sometimes you can see like what the scene looks like a little bit before it kicks us out. So if we use a wiper gadget from over here, make it a bit longer because it can take a second or two to load up the variable and check it. Then we can have it fade to black and have the in timing to be 0, which means it will start off black, and we can give it a long fall off where once it becomes unpowered, then it will take 2 seconds to fade out. So if I play that now, so it'll kind of look like that. And you can do the same on the on a doorway. It has its own wiper settings in here. So dissolve black and then give it a higher input in time, whatever. And then it'll fade to black and then fade out of black on the next scene. But if you come into it, it should start black and then fade out if you're allowed to stay in this scene. Reset and then play. So we're in the menu and then we go to the first scene, fades to black and then fades the black out, and then we go out and hopefully that will start black, but then when it tries to change it goes to the menu. So you can fiddle with that however you like to get it to look real smooth. I'd like to thank Mobius DT, The Common People, MDKD99 and all of my other supporters for making this tutorial possible. Check out TAPgiles.com to find out how you can support me in helping Dreams creators. Thanks for your consideration and I'll see you in the next one.